Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Simon Weir. I'm an academic here, undergraduate director here at the Sydney School of Architecture, Design and Planning. And I'm here to give you an introduction into some of the things to keep in mind when you're preparing your portfolio submission. All right, so as I'm sure you're aware, from the beginning, we have a portfolio admissions pathway, which allows you to get 5 extra marks on our 5 undergraduate degrees, 5 extra 8R points. And all the degrees that we have are really forms of design degrees, different kinds of design degrees. So I'm going to talk very briefly about what design is as a way of helping you to understand what we might be looking for in a design portfolio, considering that we anticipate that you won't all have lots of design work to show, but there are lots of skills and knowledge sets that you'll be able to present to us that we know will contribute towards your ability to design. Now, probably the most common explanation you hear about what design is in a high school scenario is that it's kind of like a combination of art and science. I guess that's because art and science are 2 things you do at high school. But I don't really think that's all that helpful. I think design is actually something different from art and science. It really is its own category. And since science really grew out of philosophy, particularly the form of natural philosophy, then you might start thinking it's art and philosophy, but then again, that doesn't describe it. I think a better way to understand what design is, it's a combination of technique and philosophy. And when you apply those, it's about practice and theory. So what we're looking for in your design portfolios is something that shows your abilities in technique and in theory or philosophy. Now, it's most likely, almost all the portfolios we see are demonstrations of technique and practice, not of philosophy and theory, because that's a later developmental stage of the process. What we're looking for in your portfolio, first of all, is evidence of your creative practice, but that can be a creative, pretty broadly construed. So, your submission has 3 separate sections, the personal statement, the letter of reference, and the portfolio. And the personal statement is really something quite short about why you would like to do this degree that you're coming here for. And you don't have to be overly concerned about explaining your motivations for such things. Some of my favorite portfolio submissions have had very, very short personal statements like, I really find architecture fascinating and I want to do it. And that's all I know for sure. And that communicates something about your enthusiasm. If you have some background, like you've worked for an architect or you've worked in coding and you have some experience, then sure, explain it. But that's not really the determining factor here. The second thing, of course, is a letter of reference, something that attests your character. These are kind of important, and it's useful for you to make contact with your broader community, though sometimes this is, again, not the most important part of it. The quiet admission is that you don't necessarily read these very carefully. The thing we're mostly interested in a design school is the portfolio itself, which is the main element of the pathway submission. It's a small sample of your creative work that demonstrates skill in design and, most importantly, creativity. What we're looking for is the breadth of your creative outputs. You may or may not have a broad range of creative outputs, but particularly your passion. And passion we can really think of as measurable by the time that you've spent doing the creative work. We're all design professionals here. When we see the work that you put in your portfolio, we're going to know how you made it, probably, and how long it took you to make it, almost certainly. So if you just show us, we'll be able to see your dedication, because the 2 things, two of the really important factors for a design career is, your intelligence and your ability to think through conceptual and abstract problems. But that's really what higher school is measuring. And then there's your conscientiousness, particularly your ability to work on a single project for an extended period of time, particularly in architecture. Architectural designs typically take months and months. Going from conceptualizing a building to getting it built often takes years, sometimes many years. So it's really a question of, is your creative endeavor, are you capable of engaging in a creative endeavor that takes a long time to do? Not only a long time to master, but actually a long time to do. So if you want to show us your ability at drawing, it's much more impressive to show us a sketch that clearly took you a month to do than 3,000 sketches, each of which took you 5 seconds to do. I mean, both are interesting creative things. And if you've done both, show us a sample of both. But because architecture particularly is involved in a very long-term project, your ability to stick with a project is something we really do take as an indicator of your success in architecture. Now, the final point here, the dot point, is that your portfolio will be submitted online in a PDF or similar format. And I'm doing a screen presentation here. So thinking about it really as a screen presentation like this is the way to go. Any kind of architect, any kind of creative work can be in here, whether it's music. If you want to put us a link to your music or a video link, that sounds great. Your architecture work, but also web design, 3D modeling, technical drawing, video, written work, anything that demonstrates skill in design and creativity. I've also had poems included in things like this. Now, to get to the final point, like what, of all the things that you could put in here, what should you put in? I've got my own Simon's tips. The first thing is, don't repeat yourself. Once we see that, if you want to do like a realistic pencil portrait of a person, one or maybe two is enough to show us that you can do it. Once we see the third pencil portrait, like, okay, that you could get it. If the fourth and the fifth and the sixth pencil portrait, we're like, you've repeated yourself too much. I get it already. So don't repeat yourself. Just show us what you've got, and make it concise, make it to the point. And we're not looking for long portfolios. We're looking for short, concise portfolios. We're looking for reasons to let you in, not like, we don't need to be convinced by volumes and volumes and volumes of similar work. Just show us the highlights of your collection. This is like your greatest hits album, not your entire discography. Don't exaggerate what you've done or what your skills are. One of the things we're most keen on seeing is a kind of honesty and a self-understanding about what you've achieved and what you haven't achieved. And for those of you who've done technical drawing, whether in architecture or other things, don't mistake technical drawing for creativity. They are separate. It's good for you to show us that you have technical drawing skills. You can do that in 1 or 2 pages, seriously, 1 or 2 the plan in a section. If you've done architectural drawing, that's enough. Repeating yourself is a bit of a bad sign, because you're not understanding that we know that you've got the skill. And that's really about the next point, which is be realistic and be clear. And that is important both in your self-description and your self-explanations, but being clear about what the things are. So focus on the visual and the formal. And that really does mean that if you've got creative work, photographing it well and cropping out the background and just allowing us to focus on the designed object is a really important thing. In fact, if you've only made 2 interesting things in your career, in your creative career, the best thing you could do between now and when you submit the portfolio is try to get the best possible photograph. And if you have some photo editing software, delete the background, make it the best looking photograph that you can. Spend a bit of time refining the quality of the images themselves. Because even if all you've done is you've made a table in woodwork, all that time you spend photographing it and maybe a bit of photoshopping or creating the scene for the photograph, that's a skill that's directly translatable into an architecture degree, that photographing, looking after the quality of the images. So the third do point here is allow the images to speak. We don't need a huge amount of explanatory text about what the image or the object is. Let the image do the talking, but do present a diverse forms of creativity. If you've done multiple things, show us your ability in multiple things rather than repeating the same point. And finally, do curate and select. This is probably the most important thing. Like every time I've done a portfolio review prior to the portfolio's been submitted, the thing I almost always say is you can delete half of this, make it half as long. Just show us the highlights. I think 6 pages is plenty. 10 pages is plenty. More than 10 pages, I think you're likely to be repeating yourself. Some of my favorite portfolios have been like 3, 4, 5 pages. They're like, here's the coolest thing I've ever done. That's it. What do you think? That really works as an approach. So after you've finished your portfolio, do some copy editing, do some proofreading, really spend some time on the details, the little things, the size of the font, the clarity of the language, the exact way the photographs work. Do graphic design and page layout. Do recognize that the way you display the work on the page is a skill that's going to translate across all the degrees. So doing some graphic design work, just like the slide that you're seeing on screen, red highlight, black text on the left, images on the right, over and over again. That's a useful graphic design style that you could just copy and make it look like my presentation. That's kind of my meta tip. Make it look like this presentation. That's a good way to go. But And finally, I think, do consider the portfolio itself as a designed object, not just a collage of your other creative works. Think of this PDF portfolio itself as a creative work. Make it look nice, make it well arranged, well conceived, short and to the point. So, we have our deadlines for this portfolio submission. I'm sure you have access to that information elsewhere. And this is going to be like a final point for how to use the presentation that I've just made for you as a guide for how to do your own portfolio. A lot of the images that I've been showing you so far are portrait orientation, which means that they do need to sit over one side of the page. You could start thinking about putting tons of images on the page. I think it's better to put one big image per page and a small amount of explanatory text. Although if this was a portfolio, and not a presentation about submissions, I would definitely change it like this, make the image bigger. Like that, I think we've improved the graphic design. But here, I still think we can even go one step further and make the font smaller and pull it up to the side. That's better portfolio graphic design right there. And that's now we're in horizontal landscape format for the image itself. Now, what you'd have over here on the left-hand side is maybe the title of the object, if it has a title, a tiny bit of explanation, this is probably too much, and something like what the materials are, and something to indicate the scale of the object. That's really important. So, if you want to reference to this, just look at a book on paintings or on sculptures. It'll say the title, the year, who made it, the materials, and the size, and that's it. Just something really concise like that. So they're all the key ideas I have for how to do a really good design portfolio that's short and to the point, and will give you the best chance of joining us here at the Sydney School of Architecture, Design and Planning. Now, Liam.
Hello. So I'll just add to what Simon's said, and specifically speak to those students who are looking to apply to join the design computing degree. So either the design computing degree or the Bachelor of Advanced Studies and Design Computing. Both these degrees are distinct and standalone from the architecture degrees. We obviously together, the students, the cohort across the school work together in the domain of design, but we represent the way that we look at the world very differently. So in design computing, for design computing students, we're really focused on the kind of domain of user experience design and interaction design. And this means that we have a strong focus on students' ability to be able to identify problems and to problem solve. And we kind of use this language, this nomenclature all the time about identifying problems and solving those problems through technological means of screen-based design, all this kind of stuff. So one emphasis to place for a design computing student is to include everything that Simon has said here is absolutely critical. But it's to remember that as a design computing student, we're really focused on those problems that you've identified. And so often what happens is I see submissions from students who want to demonstrate their, say, for example, their proficiency in drawing and sketching when they're applying for a design computing degree. In the design computing degree, we very rarely actually move to sketching and drawing as a primary means of documentation or producing designs. It's something that we use as to think, it's something that we use to document, and we use to communicate, but we never use it as a primary artifact. And so that's quite different to the way that architects approach design. So it's important to remember when providing a portfolio submission for a user experience oriented degree, one that's focused primarily on technologies, writing and actually kind of a discursive approach where you actually, talk about your motivation for what you've actually done is very important. And so I would say that images and multimedia, in videos, screen-based designs, wireframes, anything that you might have done in those domains are great to include. Problem statements and motivation actually become really critical as well. So if you're a design computing, potential design computing student, I would say, make sure you articulate your reasoning behind what you did. Talk about the problems you faced and how you overcame those problems. Most importantly, I think broadly with portfolio submissions, a lot of what students are concerned about or anxious about is being good enough at what they're doing. But I think echoing what Simon said, we're really looking for passionate students who are interested and excited to be in an architecture and design school. And we see that. We see that through the way that you articulate yourself and the way that you actually present the work. So it's that passion and that creativity that I think really just drives students to be successful. And so that's what I'm always looking for in portfolios is students who are really motivated about the ideas that are embedded in our degrees. And so make sure you've done a bit of background research on the degree you're applying for. Make sure you know what it is that you're going to begin learning in that degree. And you can do that by investigating the degrees online, by looking at the subjects that make up that degree, and by asking questions here as well. It's a great way to do that. So with all of that said, I think we're going to open it up for Q&A for just a second here. Shannon?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I might read through some of the questions that have come through. I feel like a really good one to start on, I'll throw to you, Simon. Are the images shown in this presentation the level of work required for the portfolio?
No, some of the things that I've shown in my presentation have been the teamwork of like second year design students over the course of a semester. Some of them have been works done in a couple of weeks. This is just going to show you some beautiful examples of junior student work at the school, not the kind of things we see in portfolios. We teach you a lot of these skills. We don't expect you to come with them in the first place.
Excellent, thanks. Liam, I know you spoke a little bit about this in what you were just speaking about, but there was a question that came through recently towards the end of when you were speaking. So I just thought it might be helpful to go over this again. For the design computing course, what type of work would you submit in the portfolio?
You can submit everything that you would submit to an architecture portfolio submission, but often I would also add to that, and it's not necessary, but multimedia submissions as well. So if you're primarily working with photography or working with video, those are two things that I would absolutely expect design computing students to be thinking about. So these can be videos which are narrative form videos. They could be screenplays or whatever. But another thing that we see more and more in this over the years, obviously at high school, some of the design stuff that we do at university in terms of screen-based design and designing for websites, that has obviously begun to become more embedded in high school education as well. So if you have built anything in a IT course, if you've built anything in a technology subject, absolutely include that. But most importantly, if you're going to include a website design or some kind of technology that you've built at high school, we really need to understand your motivation. It's nice to see students having created websites. That's all good. We need to understand why the website exists. What problem were you trying to solve, or who were you trying to communicate with when you created that website? Most importantly, if you're submitting a multimedia or website submission, you need to include at least a paragraph or two describing your motivation and intent when approaching that design.
That also leads on to another question that's come through here, and both for architecture and design computing. The students asked, could we submit pieces of work that we previously submitted for school assessments or for other requirements?
Definitely.
Yep.
Great idea.
I think it sort of relates to what I think Liam was just saying as well, of like the motivation or what the brief was. Why was this thing being brought into existence? Why create it? Will probably be important for doing that. Another question, can the, I think we've already answered whether it could be in a website format. Is there the opportunity for the uni to look at our portfolio, give some feedback? I might throw it over to Simon to just answer this.
Not really. It would be too cumbersome for us to have to review the number of things in advance. I think the best thing to do would be to look at some of the portfolio advice that you can get what's the right way to say it? Like try to, because there's often, it's like there's a bit of an anxiety in a question like that. Like, is it going to be good enough, or what should I include? Or shouldn't I include? I think the most important thing to think about this in advance is that if you've done some creative work already, in whatever field that is, then just try to find a way to make a very short, very neat presentation of what you've done. If your question is like, I have tons and tons of work, what should I cut out to make the best portfolio? Then it is a question that you, as an individual, should reflect on yourself. Like, put aside some time and think, I have these 150 creative works. What really are my best 6 or my best 10? And try to find a way to most cleanly explain to us what those objects are. And like I said, you're better off spending some time on the quality of the image that you're going to present. Like if you've got a really beautiful pencil sketch, scan it well rather than just taking a loose photograph. Spending some time learning to make images of your creative objects that look very neat and clean, you're already going to be doing the right things for your portfolio to be successful. So if you just head in that direction, you almost certainly get in.
And then there's another question here. If I'm in year 11 at the moment, should I be worried about starting my portfolio now?
I would say, like, don't be worried. Just in general, don't worry. Like, it's much more important to, like, if you want to be a graphic designer and you want to be the person that somebody pays to make a portfolio for them, then sure, like, worry about making a portfolio because that's your focus. But if you don't want to be a portfolio designer for a living and you want to be in design computing or you want to be in architecture, just spend time getting better at your creative pursuits and putting time into your creative activities. And that'll do you more good than worrying about whether or not you have a portfolio. Like I often like to remind people that some of my favorite portfolios ever have been very, very, very short. And they just like, they try to make 2 pages that says, I am really going to be interested in this. I'm really going to be, I have a passion for this kind of work, but I haven't done anything in this space yet. And to just make one image or take one beautiful photograph of something and like, that's it. You don't need to be concerned about developing a big portfolio like your life's work.
And I think it's also important to remember, as someone I also did some design stuff. I think about things that I did early in my studies, and then the next year I would look back at that work like, gosh, I've come so far. I would never put that stuff in my portfolio now because I was in such a, like, so earlier on in my journey. A year makes a huge difference when you're studying. So just be open to that as well. Next question was, I'm interested in design computing, so I want to show the work I've done in multimedia and music and web design. Will these be okay?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so same exact approach. If you've got lots of stuff, think about what's best. Think about what the most impactful things that you have done. And I just again echo just the sentiment here isn't that we're not looking for students to present this exorbitantly high quality thing. We're really looking for people who are passionate and motivated towards what you will begin to learn at university. At no point are we expecting students to come here with fully formed concepts, ideas, and a very proficient way of doing things. We're really looking for people who have to give people these marks as often as we possibly can. And so really it is just about justifying to us why you are a passionate and motivated student who is engaged with design in the context of high school as best you can and in whatever way that might be. So if you have web stuff, multimedia stuff, sketches and drawings, all of it is very useful in the context of design computing.
Next question. If we get an email saying that our portfolio has been successful, does that guarantee us a place?
I can answer that question, Shannon. So obviously, the portfolio is a way to get those 5 points. So basically, if you are close to the required ATAR for your desired course, and you submit a successful portfolio, so you get that ATAR bump up, and you need to really make sure that you keep that degree as your first preference. And with the adjusted ATARs, and if your ATAR is just 5 minutes below the required ATAR for the desired course, then yes, you will receive an offer from us. But two things to keep in mind: the portfolio is for students who are like 5 points below the ATAR requirement for their desired course. And it's not a way to tell whether you've been accepted in the degree or not. It's basically to show our academics and program directors that you really have that potential. And that's why they've given you those 5 points to hopefully assist you in meeting the requirement for your desired course.
Thanks, Ferris. There's the next question is in relation to the letter of reference. Should a teacher mention our skills and achievements and etc.? Can you elaborate on what the function of this is as part of the application? Could I throw to Simon? Could I throw to you there?
I'm sorry, I was typing in answer to another question. Could you repeat the question? What was the question?
The question is, what should the teacher or other mention our skills and achievements in the letter of reference? What's the role of the letter of reference in the portfolio?
That's a good question. What's the role of the letter of reference? It really varies a great deal. Like there's often some a part of a story about someone's character or their life experience or their relationships to people in the world, which will change the way we will view the material as a whole. I can't say there's a specific purpose. It varies a great deal. And less and more. Like if the portfolio is stunning at first glance, there's kind of not that much of a role. It's more in mid-level cases, we'll start to look into the character of the individual a little bit more. Because there are, of course, some people who are really interested in design and creativity, just haven't done it. And you might want to say something about your qualities that make you a really good candidate for a degree in this space, even though you don't necessarily have objects that demonstrate your appreciation of design.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah. Liam, this one sounds like a good one for you. I'm currently a nursing student, but thinking of transferring into design computing. Should I mention why I'm thinking of transferring?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that would speak to, motivation and intent. And funnily enough, medical students, we have a lot of them. So in health, and we have a lot of health design subjects as well. I think there's some connection there between medical technologies and process and the need for a lot of, design work there. So you wouldn't be the first nursing student, funnily enough. But yeah, definitely that would, something like that. Some argumentation around why you're moving from nursing towards design would be a perfect example of motivation.
Ferris, I might throw this one to you. Is there a limit to how many people can be accepted? And I just thought that might be a good time to talk about the guaranteed ATAR.
Yes. So if you meet the ATAR requirement for your desired course, then you're in. So basically, all you need to do is achieve the required ATAR. So if you haven't, or you think that you're not going to achieve that required ATAR, then try to bump your ATAR with a portfolio submission. So portfolio and ATAR together would help you in guaranteeing that place and receiving an offer from us.
This is probably a good question for both Simon and Liam. with a video in my portfolio, should I explain each step of what I did? And I thought this might be a good point to maybe talk about if you made a group project as well, about the importance of explaining your role in a group project.
Liam?
Shannon, I missed the question.
That's okay.
Turn serve to Simon.
It was all right. So if I was to include a video in my portfolio,
Yeah.
explaining how I approached each step, and also I was thinking this also would be a good opportunity to raise the importance of explaining your role in a group project as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, with a video, yeah, it's definitely important to say what you did. If you were the script writer, like then that's really important. But if you were the videographer, script writer, director, actor, you know, that's good too. You can say that. I think it is really important to say exactly what your role was in a group project. But in terms of documenting your process, I mean, I sound like a broken record here, but in capturing the purpose and reason for producing the work, say for example you were creating a video that was about a specific topic, something that you were passionate, interested in, something that I've seen ones that have been about people's concern for animals in Australia becoming extinct. I've seen ones that are about a screenplay, some kind of narrative thing. The motivation statement really captures the sentiment of kind of what you did and the process by which you got there. It says, I saw this problem in the world and I wanted to create something to speak to it, to talk about it, to explore it. And you kind of play by play actually work us through your reasoning about creating the design. And by doing that, you can actually capture quite succinctly exactly what your role in it was. Yeah, hopefully that answers.
And I'll just answer this one quickly myself because it's something we've already covered, but I'll just say it again. Is it possible to get a place purely based on portfolio? No, it's not, unfortunately. It is a conjunction with the other components of your application. So it's in relation to your ATAR or your equivalent ATAR. And so it's not purely on portfolio. The portfolio is a complement to whatever metric you're coming into the university through. So just an important note there, it's not purely on portfolio. Is there a specific level of maths needed? No, so there is no maths requirement for any of our degrees at architecture, design and planning. So none of the undergraduate degrees have a maths component requirement. What will happen if we are still below the ATAR requirement with the adjustment factors? Unfortunately, we won't be able to offer you a place, even if you even if your portfolio is deemed as at the level that we are willing to make it a successful portfolio submission. If your ATAR is still below what's required of the degree, unfortunately, we can't offer you a place. But you could also just remember that you can look at the other degrees that we have on offer. Please always remember that don't always think that you can't come and study with us just because that one degree is not within your ATAR, your guaranteed ATAR range.
Just to add to that as a form of encouragement, a lot of our best students ultimately did a first year in some other degree and then transferred over to here. It's probably an advantage. It might not, like a lot of you trying to come in straight away, it might not be good news to hear that, but it really is good to go learn a little bit more about people and about the world before you come into designing for people in the world. So it's not a disadvantage. And if you think about your career, a year is nothing. It's a good idea to do whatever you can at Sydney Uni or in the built environment or in design degrees anywhere and then transfer over.
Yeah, and you can also do, start in another degree within the University of Sydney, and then you can apply for internal transfer. And you may be able to transfer some of the credit of the units of study that you've studied in that degree towards your degree in architecture, design and planning. So I think we're probably coming to an most of the questions have been answered unless our panelists say if there's any question that needs to be addressed urgently. But anyway, I'll put it in the chat. the upcoming portfolio pathway workshop. So I would really encourage you to register and attend that workshop as well. It will really give you, for those who, who didn't have their questions answered, or, if you want to still interested in learning more about the portfolio, please join us in that session on the 15th of September.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Hopefully see you next year.